Okay, true story. 8 friends gathered around a backyard dinner party in Washington, D.C. They're celebrating a restaurant one of them had just opened. It was about 10 p.m. There's a fellow there named Michael. He had his wife and daughter, and he was talking to his wife when he noticed a hand and the barrel of a gun come between them. A man of medium build in a clean sweatsuit stepped up and pointed the gun at his daughter, and then pointed the gun at his wife, and looked Michael in the face and said, "Give me your money or I'm going to start effing shooting." And it was an odd coincidence that no one at the party had any money. So they started casting around, trying to figure out what they were going to do to dissuade this man, and the first thing that they came on was guilt. What would your mother think of you? Didn't work. I haven't got any effing mother. So now it's tense. And Michael's looking around and he's saying, someone's going to get hurt, maybe everybody. At which point, a woman named Christina stepped up and tried a different tack. "Hey, we're all celebrating," she said. "Why don't you sit down and share a glass of wine?" Michael said it was like a switch flipped. You could feel it. The man took the glass of wine. "Damn, that's a good glass of wine." Michael offered him the bottle. He put his gun in his pocket, reached for some cheese. He said, "Hey, could I have a hug?" Christina hugged him. Mike's wife hugged him. How about a group hug? They all huddled around him, gave him a hug, and when they let him go, he said, "I'm sorry," and walked out with his glass of wine. So what happened there? Michael says he knows what happens. It was a miracle, and you can see why he would think that, but I want to propose something different happened. I want to propose that was compassion done powerfully. And by compassion, I don't mean the casual phrases that we throw off. I don't mean, "I feel terrible for you," "I can't imagine how you feel," or "I know just how you feel." I don't mean that. I mean finding and meeting fundamental needs. And by fundamental human needs, I don't mean a glass of wine, a chunk of cheese, and a stack of cash. I mean those universal things that we feel we've got to have to survive as tribal animals. So I mean, sure, safety and security, but also affection, connection, being seen and heard, belonging. So we don't know what the gunman needed that night. We may never know. Whatever it was, Christina may have stumbled on it by accident or by instinct, but he wanted it more than money. And it was strong enough to deflect a bullet and maybe save a life and maybe more. So the question to us becomes, wouldn't it be great if we could marshal that and create those results in critical situations and it wasn't a miracle? Wouldn't it be great if we were adept at handling human interactions so that we could keep conflict from escalating or so that we could sidestep it altogether? And in my experience, we can. And what that takes is reimagining compassion, not as kind of simple warmth or kindness, but instead a set of concrete practices that you can use when you don't want to get into a test of wills, that you can use when you're afraid that force will fail or escalate or backfire. Pretty simple set of practices. So listen for a call for help, share empathy, and share options. How would that look? Well, here's an example that comes from work that I've done in healthcare. Comes up pretty often. How do you cope with a patient or a family member who's really upset? This comes from work that I did in a youth mental health clinic in a really, really difficult part of town. So there's a woman in the lobby, and she's a patient's mother, and she's screaming and yelling and stomping. She's yelling at her kids, "You better get the hell over here. You better sit your butt down. You better listen to your mother." And she's yelling at the receptionist, "You better get me in to see my damn doctor." They send out a security guard, he says, "Ma'am, you can't talk that way." She ignores him. The lobby's electric. So put yourself in that situation. What are you going to do? If you're like most people, you're going to try to get her to calm down. And that's what David tried. He was the therapist who had to go out and deal with her. He said, "Ma'am, I need you to calm down." You're right. You're right. Didn't work. Failed utterly. So, what we want to get clear on is why it failed. And the reason that it failed is that he was dealing at the level of actions, not at the level of deep-seated needs that we've been talking about. So imagine a bullseye that has needs at its center and actions at the periphery. Here's the problem. This woman comes in, and you can tell she's got some really deep-seated needs, yes? So she tries to come up with an action plan that will meet those needs. And when she comes up with one, she gets attached to it. Becomes if only I can carry out these actions, I'll get these needs met. And so those actions stand in place of those needs. So when David walks up and says, "You can't do those actions," he becomes an enemy that's coming between her and what she needs. And two things happen. He becomes an enemy, someone standing between her and her needs, and she escalates. So she won't listen to him, and she escalates. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to go through that process that we talked about. Listen for a call for help. And that means thinking about that dynamic that we talked about before and bypassing actions and going to needs. So looking at that woman and saying, she is not an opponent that I need to stop. She is a person with needs that she needs badly, and she's afraid she's going to fail. And that flips a switch in me, and I begin to get more open. Then I can exchange empathy with her. So essentially, that means going to this person that I used to see as an opponent and saying, "What do you need?" And you can use emotions as a guide. So if I'm getting my needs met, I'm some kind of happy. If I'm not getting my needs met, I'm some kind of suffering. I'm in pain or I'm angry. So David steps up to this woman and says, "You seem really upset." That's the emotion. "Do you need attention?" That's the need. She didn't thank him, right? Because that's the point she's been trying to get across for 30 minutes. But if he can keep that up, if he can keep up acknowledging her needs and acknowledging her feelings, she'll experience that as empathy. A switch will begin to flip in her, and she'll begin to open up. And what David found out when that happened was that there was a lot of fear behind this woman's anger. Her eldest son had just been thrown out of his third daycare for aggression, essentially for bullying. And she didn't see how she was going to get him care and put food on the table, so she was near tears. Now that David understands that, he's faced with a whole different problem than he thought he was. So now he can begin to share options with her. What looked at first like it was a demand for her to get in to see her doctor now shows up as something that can be solved a whole variety of ways. We can call your daycare center and explain to them what's going on. We can get a referral to another agency. We can call your neighbors and see if we can enlist them. And there are other options. So there are a whole variety of options, and that's important because what we're driving with this form of compassion is collaboration. It's not domination. It's not intimidation. It's not submission. And it's not compromise. This isn't yell quieter. This is a new set of options that didn't seem to be on the table before we could talk to each other. And that model that I've just laid out to you works really well one-on-one, and it works across domains. So it works all throughout healthcare, but we've also discovered that it works with parents who want cooperation from their kids, or mothers who want a better experience of life with her mother, or an executive who's got a corporate initiative and is trying to get cooperation from another executive who doesn't owe it to him. So it transfers across domains. But you might ask yourself, okay, good. It works with friends and family, it works with colleagues, it works with customers. That's nice. What about people who hate you? What about your enemies? And it's great that it works one-on-one, but we have systemic issues. What about systems? Does it work on a system-wide basis? And Connie Rice might have been asking herself those kinds of questions a few years ago. Connie Rice is a civil rights attorney and activist in LA. And her lawsuits have brought in better than $10 billion in damages as she's tried to protect and fight for communities like the Watts neighborhood in LA. You may be familiar with the Watts neighborhood. It's got a tough history. That's a place that people described as a cross between a tenement and a dilapidated army barracks. In 1965, you might remember the riots ended up in 34 deaths and $40 million in property damage. And when you're talking about property damage as a result of riots in your neighborhood, you're talking about rocks and bullets and broken glass and fire. Riots again following Rodney King's arrest in 1991, this time 55 deaths and $1 billion in damages. That's a tough neighborhood. In the 80s and 90s, there were so many homicides in this neighborhood that parents took to having their kids sleep in the bathtub. And the police responded with paramilitary campaigns. You may remember Cops in Riot Gear. Campaigns that went by names such as Crash or Operation Hammer. And it was as a result of those campaigns and the Rodney King incident, Connie Rice went to war. In her words, went to war with the LA Police Department and began to launch lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit and was successful until she stopped. And you might wonder why she stopped after 20 years. And the reason was she looked at that neighborhood and said, this will never be enough. These lawsuits will never end. You cannot legislate behavior change. This community I'm trying to protect is segregating and, in her words, turning into a killing zone. So what do? She said, this problem will be solved with empathy and compassion. Over the course of 18 months, she interviewed 900 police officers. Think of what an act of courage that is. To go into the heart of a group that you've been fighting for 20 years and ask, what do you need? And what she heard was fear beneath the brutality. Time and time again, Ms. Rice, I'm terrified of black men. Ms. Rice, you know, those black men, they come out of prison, they have that great Hulk strength. I'm afraid they're going to kill me. Can you teach me how not to be afraid of black men? How tough is that to hear from a group of people who've pulled over your neighbors, pulled them out of their cars, thrown them on the ground, and searched them with no provocation? And her response to that was not labeling them, but saying, to me and my community, that sounds like racism. To you, it doesn't. It's a true expression of fear. And any solution that we're going to come up with that's going to work has got to work for my community, and it's got to work for you as well. So we need to work together. There's a model of courage. So they came up with a new model of policing. They brought together the community, civil rights advocates, the police force, and they came up with a four-pronged model of policing. Police hanging out in the neighborhoods, tutoring kids, setting up sports teams, and even setting up health screenings. And you got to ask yourself, come on, this is a gang-torn neighborhood. This is a neighborhood with a paramilitary presence in it. And you're gonna form study groups and health screenings. How did that work? In Nickerson Gardens, where it was piloted, 66% drop in property crime, 90% drop in physical crime. That means people getting hurt. The Watts neighborhood is still torn by struggle between police and the residents, but overall, 70% drop in homicides. Been very effective. It's held up as a model around the country. And that model that we talked about, that model of interacting, of showing compassion and empathy, works system-wide in other areas as well. It works when, for example, you're trying to reduce recidivism among prison inmates, and it's been shown to be effective at fighting bullying in school districts where zero-tolerance policies fail. So it generalizes. What's the takeaway? Compassion is power. Compassion is not what you fall back on when force fails. Compassion, if done deliberately, can turn enemies into allies. And when that happens, you're solving different problems that you started with. And you're facing solutions that weren't on the table and weren't in your imagination when you started. Compassion is power. So what does that mean to you? I don't know what part of the world you're trying to change, or what change you may feel being thrust upon you right now. But wouldn't it be great to be powerful? Wouldn't it be great if you could create results like that at critical times and it wasn't a miracle? And you can. You can win and other people don't have to lose. You can create change and you don't have to force people. And the process can be healing. So how do you start? Next time you're toe-to-toe with somebody, whether that's face-to-face or whether that's over Twitter or over Facebook or whatever social media you have, next time you're face-to-face with someone who opposes you, who threatens you, who annoys you, who angers you, who you see as an enemy, consider that the 4 most powerful words that you can use may not be, "This will not stand." It might be, "What do you need?" Thank you.
yang ada dalam benak saya gitu, orang barat tuh hedonis atau ya semacam itulah.
Walaupun mereka tinggal di Indonesia, belum tentu mereka pernah masuk dunia pesantren.
I'd actually never heard of a pesantren before, but I asked around, and from what people told me, it sounds like just kind of like a Muslim boarding school, and I'm not sure whether it would be in a community or more isolated, but yeah, it just sounds like one of those Muslim kind of training boarding schools.
Truthfully, I've never been to one, and I'm just thinking it's just a village.
Traditional. Self too, I've never been to a pesantren.
Untuk mewujudkan acara ini memang agak berat. Mengapa? Karena ada beberapa dinding yang harus saya lewati. Nah, ketika saya pertama kali menyampaikan gagasan ini kepada pihak pesantren, mereka menjawabnya oke, no problem. Nah, beberapa hari kemudian dia meminta kepada saya untuk menjadikan acara itu hanya 1 hari. Dan saya berusaha untuk meyakinkan pada saat itu kepada wakil untuk melakukan tetap 2 hari, sebab itu akan lebih baik. Tapi kemudian pihak pesantren ternyata membatalkan acara ini. Nah, kemudian saya menjadi bingung. Problemnya itu sebetulnya apa? Nah, sebagian guru mengatakan bahwa memang fasilitas yang dimiliki oleh pesantren itu tidak cukup. Tapi saya juga mendengar dari guru yang lain bahwa karena faktor masalah perbedaan agama lah yang menjadi masalah. Tapi alhamdulillah pada akhirnya pesantren dengan bijaksana memberikan izin kepada kami untuk menyelenggarakan Breaking Down the Walls ini untuk 1 hari. Dan alhamdulillah sukses.
Saya Iara menyiapkan alat musik. Does your school have a pretty good team?
Okay, I think we're okay.
Yeah. How many times have you lost this year?
We haven't lost yet.
Have not lost yet.
We have not lost yet.
Do you think Garud is a good place to lose?
No, not really.
No. Okay. What advice would you give to players if they're playing against you? How should they plan so that they might be able to beat you?
Get taller.
Kayaknya sih biasa aja gitu, nggak ada yang spesial. Paling cuma tinggi-tinggi doang. Kalau dari skill kayaknya bisa diimbangi mas.
Think our team will win?
Definitely.
Mereka cukup ya lebih perfect lah dibandingkan dengan sekolah-sekolah yang lainnya. Tapi kalau dibandingkan dengan dia, saya yakin dia lebih perfect daripada Bais.
Kira bahwa yakin bisa menang?
Insya Allah, karena Allah selalu berada di urat nadi saya.
Saya mau datang, mau bertemu dengan kalian, mau main, bersosialisasi. Yeah.
When you came here, I hope you will enjoy this situation. This is a very nice place. There's a lot of trees, and you'll find a very good view over here. And then I'm sure that we will be accepting you as well. And well, yeah, have a nice visit over here, and don't scared to be here.
Some of your friends were uncomfortable or afraid to go?
I didn't hear anyone say that, but maybe some people were. Based on my friends and the personalities that I know of a couple people who were kind of unsure of what kind of, they just weren't really sure about whether it would be safe or not, but they obviously felt like God wanted them to go. So.
One thing that I want to told you that don't you have a negative thinking about this school first, because this is not the way that you think about this boarding school. In this boarding school, we learn like you did. In the other school, we learn about science and both, but we also learn about the religion science.
Space to develop their
Our students to visit Darul Arqam and
to study about peace and to learn about other cultures.
For fun, this is our doctor, Dr. Matt.
You're itching? Yeah. Why? I'll get some cream. Maybe your itches will go away. Okay, never mind. Oh, you're better?
Yeah, here.
What the? Oh, you have a cough? Yeah. Here, I'll get some medicine. Where are you going? Here, I'll get some medicine. Like, I'm okay. Oh, okay. Oh, your back hurts. Oh, your back. Let me take a look.
A group of 5 people. So you have to get in a group of 5 people. If you're not in a group at the end, then you're out. Group of 8.
People here. Well, the pesantren's a lot more advanced than I thought it would be, but yeah, it's really cool. The people are really nice. The people are actually more friendly than I thought they would be. It's nice. The food was pretty good. The rooms looks like a lot of fun to live in a dorm. Yeah, but the place is really nice. I was surprised.
Before I came, I didn't think that it was going to be so modern and that they would have such good English. But now I realize that the people are friendly, they have great English, they know a lot about our culture, and yeah, they have good facilities, a good basketball team. So yeah, that's something I learned.
I was surprised I didn't know it was this big, and the campus is really big, and yeah, they also building these new buildings, and they also have the facilities are really nice, and like the science department, technology department is really good. And, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I always thought kind of the same thing. Pesantren was where kids were just woke up, go to school, eat, go to bed kind of thing. But they do have fun here. They get to do sports. They just get to hang out in their rooms. They talk. They laugh. It's a lot more relaxed and more fun than I expected it to be, which is really fun.
Do you want to try to be a student here, to wake up in 5?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd want to have school from 5 in the morning till 9 at night.
No, visiting it is fun. I'll visit, but
my shorter school seems funner.
Yeah, 7 hours a day is enough for me.
Ternyata mereka itu nggak jauh beda gitu sama kita.
Berarti sebelumnya berpikir bahwa mereka itu berbeda. Misalnya apa bedanya?
Saya sempat berpikir kasar, sombong gitu. Ternyata mereka baik-baik banget. Seneng. I like it here a lot and stuff. They're I don't know, they're just as I expected. They're fun and stuff, and like they're a lot more funner than I thought. You know, I imagined it's a little bit stricter, but they turned out to be like extremely fun to be around and hang around with, and very friendly.
Yeah, nothing is impossible. We can make peace in the world, but it's going to be pretty hard now because much things have happened.
Because when the conflict is so deep, it needs a whole new generation of people. So it needs to start with the kids, and then maybe when they're adults, we'll be able to have peace.
This is bacon. No, this is very bad. This is a criminal. Hey, oh no, criminal. That's good.
And breaking down the walls of separation, just accepting other cultures and not being prideful or arrogant. Yeah, just accepting others.
First of all, like, forgive if someone does something bad to you or something. Always forgive. Keep loving them. Don't be hateful.
You can make peace. Like, if you want to make change, you have to initiate it yourself. So if you like start with your friends and you make peace with them, then it can grow, you know. And it's like, so I think we can.
Yes, I think we could have peace. Maybe not like completely peace, because there's always going to be some people who cause violence or whatever. But I think you could have, yeah.
Happiness and live in peace. Here are the example that will be presented with a little transition, and here it is. One day, at a school, there is a new student. Her name is Laura, and she's from Korea. She can self-dance.
If we as different cultures, white, come here, then when we go back and tell our families, we will say, you know, we met these people, they were this way, kind, caring, and then everybody will start to hear about the great people that we keep fighting with, and so then we can start changing our friends, and from our friends we can start changing the world. But it's slow, but I think it's a start.
I think as just the next generation of people, I think we can influence the younger kids' thinkings, maybe not the older, just adults' thinkings, but us as young adults are the future of like the world, and I think if our mindsets and hearts change now, I think it'll have a huge effect when we grow up, and if we can affect our younger siblings and younger friends, then even the generation after that will continue to just be very peaceful.
I felt really happy today. It was a great day, especially when we sit and talking with the strangers.
So this is, like I said, this is an outstanding thing that has happened today. It's like a dream come true for Pakaji school and also my school, Vice. So I am really privileged to be here with everyone.
Well, I think this is everything, right? Sure. So we are not talking about religion. We are not talking about different nations, because we are in the same level. We are humans, okay? And we need to know each other, okay? Culture, everything.
We hear of so much hate that we become numb to it. Hatred and violence should have no place in our life. Change must be made, but we must act for ourselves. We cannot wait for the other to make change.
I am very proud of you. I'm proud of our students from Bais. They chose to come here.
so amazing for me.
To stuff and just always be a part of your life and be able to make new relationships and make new friends. And thank you so much. Hope I can come here again.
Everyone I've met here, thank you for taking me to your dorm and teaching me Jaipong and Isang and yeah, just hanging out, showing me what a girl's dorm is like. It was very fun. Thank you.
And I just had a lot of fun. And just you guys are very good
To make us met here, and I just everyone wish together. I hope you all from West is never forget us.
Instead of like what I have too many spare time, how I can accustom with them.
I'm very sad. I want to say very thank you for you all. I love you all, friends. Thank you.
But now you can sit together and talking. It's just like they're breaking down the walls. Thank you.
停車，識食。
要感受。
我哋發現澳門垃圾越嚟越多，廚餘大約佔咗澳門垃圾嘅一半。我哋睇到學校嘅小賣部有好多食剩嘅食物，十分浪費。
Imagine 想像。
我哋希望加強人們對澳門現今廚餘嘅了解，令人們知道廚餘嘅影響同埋學會唔浪費，改變社會嘅風氣，實行從源頭減廢。
Do 實行。
製作咗海報同埋網站，然後選擇咗數十間唔同嘅餐廳進行宣導，將印有二維碼嘅貼紙張貼於餐廳嘅門口同埋餐牌上面。客人同埋店員亦都可以掃描到我哋設計嘅網站，令佢哋了解更多關於識食嘅資訊。
Share 分享。
我哋將活動分享到 Facebook 專頁入邊，活動有19間食店同埋82人嘅響應。
Hi, my name is Aisha. Hi, my name is Angelina. Hi, my name is Annie. Hi, my name is Shahira. Hi, my name is Anusha. We are from Singing to the Lion.
We are going to share about bully cases that happen in our country. There are many things that we feel is important to prevent.
So, we think that the most important thing to action are
the government didn't take any action, lack of exposure,
people didn't take this bully case very serious,
and also lack of awareness.
I imagine that every time I'm on my way to my house, that there would be no one whispering while looking at me.
Imagine that no one will punch me when I go to school every day.
Happy school, zero bully, refuse speak up and confident performance.
Great project is so free. Better Malaysia. So we think that it's very important to work with teachers, students and government to prevent the increased cases of bullying in Malaysia. That is our 6 months. We make 2 camps, one for mentor-mentee, another for coordination team and performance team in order to make more cooperate between them. After that, we also participate in the Kindness Challenge project, which is focusing in community projects in order to prevent bully cases.
So, the most importantly are, we are working with 47 students from 5 different schools in Kedah in order to produce and perform a show called Singing to the Lion.
The impact of Singing to the Lion is 5 different schools work together to show a 6 shows in front 720 people at Penang Park. And as a result, many citizens know about different types of bully cases and also how dangerous these things begin in our country. Be a buddy, not a bully.
As a conclusion, we should stand together in order to fight against these bully cases in Malaysia and a way to create a better Malaysia.
Together, we stand, fight against bullying.
Say no to bullying.
We hope that we can perform this Singing to the Lion show as an international show to every school until zero bullying.
Hi everyone. So just to begin my talk, I'd like everyone here to imagine that you're British. And now, if you're anything like me, when you wake up in the morning, you'll open up Facebook and then you'll scroll through your news feed and you'll look at all the articles, photos, and videos that have been posted overnight. Now imagine that you stumble across this article by the Daily Express. Germany plots tax on British motorists to cover growing bill for its 1.1 million migrants. And then you wonder, hey, what's going on? What's this foreign government doing? And so you open the article and you read further in, and then you discover that Angela Merkel has opened up Germany to Syrian asylum seekers. And these asylum seekers are placing a strain on Germany's budget. They're there in Germany committing all these crimes. They're raping women on New Year's Day. And here you have this foreign government that's taking in all these foreign refugees. They're going to put themselves on the world stage as this bastion of light and truth and hope. And then they're going to make you pay for it. They're going to make you, the British taxpayer, foot the bill for this decision. How many of you think that this tax is fair? This is a foreign government that's making you pay for their decision. No one. And so with this in mind, I'd like to introduce you to these 4 children. Dala, Hadiya, Muhammad, and Saif. Now imagine this. You've grown up in Syria your whole life. Sure, it's war-torn, there's plenty of violence, and there's lots of conflict, but hey, Syria's home. But one day that conflict grows so bad that you have to leave. You have to run away from Syria. And while you're escaping from Syria, your father dies. And so now, you're a foreign refugee, living in a foreign and strange land, living in extreme poverty, raised by a single mother who works herself to the bone, working multiple odd jobs just to put some food on the table so that you won't starve to death. And here you have Karam Foundation saying that you can help these children by donating to them and helping them out by maybe giving them the money they need to have some food, to have housing, to give them an education, the education that they need to escape this poverty trap. How many of you here would click that donation button to help these children? One there, one there. See, you have more hands, you have more people willing to donate to help these children. And so this brings me to my point. Empathy. You see, a lot of us here are familiar with the difference between empathy and sympathy. You know, we're always told that sympathy is this thing where you look at someone's problems and go, ooh, yeah, you're in a bad state. You know, at least you have this going for you. And we're always told that empathy is about relating to another person, being able to understand their problems by relating to your own experiences. But hang on a minute. Just a few minutes ago, I was able to, through the use of emotionally charged language, I was able to change your empathy, who you empathize with, from the British taxpayer to these Syrian children. You see, the money that Germany is collecting will ultimately go to these Syrian children, to refugees like these Syrian children. And so why was there this change? Why was there this change in empathy? And this brings me to my first issue about empathy. You see, the thing about empathy is that because it's about relating to our own experiences, we're able to empathize a lot better with people who have experiences that are similar to our own. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I think this is a great thing. In fact, this is the reason why there's so much funding for things like cancer research, research into cures for AIDS and for Alzheimer's and dementia. And all these are great and wonderful causes. But at the same time, this ability to disproportionately empathize better with groups of people whose experiences reflect our own is the reason why in 2014, the world had to dump tens of thousands of buckets of ice water on their heads before we finally found out what amyotrophic lateral sclerosis was, or ALS. And then we wonder why. And to further expand on my point, I'll tell you the story of 2 small girls born in the mid-1940s. The first is that of Kathy Ann Fiscus. The second one is that of Christia Wise. Kathy Ann Fiscus was born in 1945 in suburban LA. And when she was 3 years old, she was playing in her backyard when she fell into a well that her father had dug in 1903. And so 68 years ago, on this day, the whole of the United States had its attention turned on the rescue efforts, just meant to bring this little girl out of the well. The whole world felt for Kathy Ann Fiscus. The whole world thought how scared she must be down in that little well. And eventually when she was brought out, they found her dead at the bottom of the well. And so she was buried, and she was remembered as the little girl who united the nation for a moment. Now, I wanted to bring you to the story of Christia Weiss. Now, Christia Weiss was born in 1946 to an Austrian woman, and she was the illegitimate daughter of a Red Army soldier. Now, Christia Weiss is one of the occupation children. She's called as an occupation child in her home country because she's the daughter of a foreign soldier. And so, as a child, she grew up being ostracized by her peers because her peers were told to ignore her, to leave her alone, because she was the daughter of the enemy. And then when she grew up, her husband hurled hurtful comments at her because of her background and because of her backstory. And so Christia Weiss lived in this emotional and psychological well of hurt and pain for her whole life. And in fact, the interesting thing is, this picture you see here, this little girl you see on the screen, may not even be Christia Weiss. You see, I came to know about Christia Weiss's story through an article on the BBC, some obscure article on the BBC about these children. And Christia Weiss's story was just a small anecdote in the whole article, and it just so happened that this picture was next to her anecdote. And underneath that picture, there's this caption about the children. And so here we see this ability to empathize with people like Kathy Ann Fiscus has led to the world paying a disproportionately large amount of attention and giving a lot more of our sympathy to people like her, while people like Christia Weiss, who are in no less need of help and care and love, just fade away from history, just like that. And we wonder why. Why is it like this? What happened? And so I think that at the end of the day, all this draws its roots from the way we view the world. You see, this is how we would like to view the world. We'd like to see ourselves as this small speck in this larger social fabric of the world. And it's true. This is the objective truth. And as rational social creatures, we realize that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in spite of what we like to think, that this is us and this is the rest of the world, the sad reality is that in our minds, this is what it looks like. It's big me, and the rest of the world is this little tiny circle that we can look through when we don't feel like it, and we can connect with it when we feel like it. And really, this is where we empathize with people, but there's so much of the world that we don't really care about because our own experiences don't overlap with it. And so ultimately, in essence, while we like to think that we're like these rabbits, the truth of the matter is, we're really more like this rabbit here. It's all about me. Deal with it. And it's not this mentality of it's all about me, deal with it, that's dangerous. It's the idea that we're like this, but we actually think that we're like this, that's really dangerous. Because we go around thinking that we've done some good, that we've helped another person, but in reality, what we've done is to simply project ourselves onto another person and think that we've helped them. We walk away thinking that we've done something good, we've changed the world, but in reality, we've just hurt them. For example, take animal cruelty. In so many countries, there's so many laws about how to kill mammals like sheep, pigs, cows. There's so many laws on how to kill them humanely. You have to stun them, you have to make sure they're unconscious before you slit their throats, and you have to make sure that they die a quick death. And that's because as mammals, we recognize their calls of distress when they're being led into the abattoir. When they see the knife, we recognize the pain that they see. But at the same time, you have the fishing industry, which drags out millions upon billions of fish out of the water every year, every day. And these fish die a slow and painful death. Out of the water, they suffocate. But does anyone care? Does anyone say, hey, these fish are dying? No, no one. And that's because we can't empathize with them. Does it mean that their pain is any less? No. And so it's because of this that we see some problems related to empathy emerging. And the first problem is empathy, first of all, is tiring and emotionally draining. Just extending on this metaphor of rabbits, all of us are like rabbits, and we all have our own struggles, we have our own dark periods, and I like to liken this to rabbit holes, these dark little holes. And so when we empathize with someone, it's akin to seeing someone stuck in a rabbit hole, and you say, hey, I'm going to empathize with this person, so I'm going to dig a hole of my own, and I'm going to sit in that hole, and I'm going to feel for myself what it's like to be in that hole. But the truth of the matter is, digging a hole and putting yourself in the hole and imagining what it's like to be stuck there is very tiring. It's taxing because you're going beyond yourself. You're in a way defying this idea of how it's all about me at the end of the day. And so we come to this next idea of how the world looks more like this. You see, because it's so tiring and emotionally draining to go about empathizing with people, digging holes and sitting in the holes, imagine what it's like. You see, for every hole that we jump into, for every hole that we are perfectly able to sit in and really feel what it's like to be in there are many more holes around. The world is littered with plenty of rabbit holes. And so for every hole that we jump into, there are hundreds upon thousands more holes that we'll never be able to see, that we'll never be able to jump into. And this really brings me to my next point. You see, the thing about empathy, the thing about digging holes and jumping into it, this whole process of empathy is flawed. Why? Because when we are digging a hole, when we sit in it, and when we eventually find a way to jump of it, and eventually tell the other rabbit in the hole, hey, I found a way out. Yeah, it's dark in there, but I found a way out. You see, that whole process is influenced by our own personal experiences, our own memories, our own pains, our own values. And none of those those values can never be exactly the same as that of the other person. And so the hole we dig can never be the same. The way we see the hole can never be the same. What might be a dark and scary hole to one person might be a small, tight, cozy space to you. And the way you jump out of the hole will also be different. And so, what this ultimately means is that pure empathy, being truly able to completely put yourself in someone else's shoes, is not only emotionally draining and tiring, but it's also practically impossible. You know, just to illustrate my point, I'd just like to show you this picture of rabbits. You see, empathy is like, empathizing with someone is like being like this rabbit here. This rabbit here has decided, okay, I'll dig another hole so that I know what it's like to be this rabbit in this hole. But what do you notice? You see that this hole this rabbit has dug is not exactly the same as this hole. You see, this rabbit has taken this path down into this hole, but this rabbit has taken this path down into the hole. So while there is some similarity, it's not perfectly the same. And the experience of this rabbit may not be the same as the experience of this rabbit. And so what do? Are we stuck to becoming these selfish creatures who can't fully empathize? No. Where empathy is unable to help us help other people, with this idea of compassion that comes in. You see, compassion is different, even though we often conflate compassion and empathy. They're very different things. And you see, compassion is illustrated by this rabbit here. You see, the idea of compassion is we don't necessarily have to reach all the way down into the rabbit hole like empathy demands we do. Empathy means that we have to become the rabbit, we have to sit in the hole, and we have to really understand and fully think about, oh, this hole is dark, it's scary. We fully have to understand that. But the thing is impossible. The thing is that it's impossible. But with compassion, you see, compassion doesn't demand that we fully enter the rabbit hole. Compassion, on the other hand, requires that you reach a hand out into the rabbit hole. And you call out to the rabbit that's hiding in the hole, and you say, you can come out when you want to. And that's very different from empathy. Because you see, empathy is a personal experience where you sit in the hole by yourself and you think about how painful it is. Compassion reaches out. Compassion places control in the hand of the other person, more so than empathy does. Because when you have compassion, you reach out to the rabbit in the hole, and it's ultimately up to the rabbit in the hole to say, yes, I want to come out, and then you can help the rabbit out. Compassion says it's okay if you can't fully go down the rabbit hole, because it's not about you, more so than empathy thinks it is. And so I just want to leave you on a final note of this idea of compassion. I'd just like to implore all of you, so whenever you see a rabbit hole, I'd just like to ask that all of you don't go about digging rabbit holes, because this world has plenty of rabbit holes. We all have our own, dark places to live in. And if other people live in shallow holes, some people have really dark and scary holes to live in, some people live in holes that are so dark and scary that they don't even realize that they're in the hole. And so, instead of thinking that we can dig holes to exactly emulate that of other people's holes, I'd just like to implore all of you that the next time you see a rabbit hole, the next time you see someone in need, I'd just like to ask all of you to instead reach a hand out into that hole and pull the rabbit out. Because there's so much more power in that. Because you free another person. And that's the main power of compassion over empathy. Thank you.
在哪里捡到的？收藏啊，是哦。
瞬间忘记天空会放弃，因为情曾经盲目追寻，找不到自己，忘记生存意义，只因为再没有
水洗了很谢谢他们。我们现在会来做9份报道，因为我要帮助那些受伤的鸟兽。